Okay, welcome everyone. This is the June 11th IDA meeting of Seneca County. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First agenda item today is the approval of the minutes of May 14th of our last meeting. We have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ben, thank you. Are there any comments, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of the last meeting? Any opposed? That is carried. Number two, the approval of the IDA financial statements through April. Ben, you have the floor.
I'm going to defer to Sarah.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to review this with Bob, so I can make comments.
Sarah, would you like to make any comments on the financial?
Sure, I'll just go over a couple of brief things. So we'll start with the balance sheet, just with the statement page, or not the statements, but the comments that the accountant and bookkeeper make in relation to the statement. So there was, at the time these were done, Schrader was a bit behind on payments. I just wanted to point out that that has since been corrected, so that's no longer an issue there. We did get the 19,000 approximately in agency fee income from Scepter. That tends to get booked under pilot payment and then gets moved later on to agency fee income. So you'll see that our pilot program on the balance sheet decreased by about 19,000. And if you look in the P&L, you will notice that for the month of April, our agency fee income was $20,633. So that's due to that Scepter payment. Just for comparison's sake, because I know last month someone had questions about this, so the year-to-date, if you look at the P&L column 4, year-to-date April of last year was significantly higher. It was $124,000. That was the Wilkins RV project. We closed early on in 2023 with that, so that is, where we're seeing sort of the agency fee happening. The other significant changes between the 2 years, there was nothing else really on the balance sheet. As far as the P&L goes, our interest income this year is up significantly compared to last year, and we've talked about this before. That's mostly because of our CDs. The interest rates are much better this year than they were last year, so we're able to book more income there. No other significant items or anything really out of the ordinary. The only change is April. You will notice there was our $12,000 audit fee was booked under professional services, so that did have a bit of a jump this month compared to last month. And even last year, our professional services this time of year were lower. I think the audit last year got billed out a little bit later. I think it got billed in May, if I'm not mistaken. So that's what's contributing to those variations.
Questions for Sarah? Is there a motion to approve the financial statements through April?
So moved.
Seconds.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is carried. Okay. We have item number 3, some revisions to a previous resolution. Sarah, do you want to take us through that?
Sure. So last year, this board approved final resolutions for 2 Lodi solar projects. It was Lodi PV LLC and Lodi 2 PV LLC. And getting ready to close on that project, which hopefully we'll be doing sometime in the near future. Rob realized that there had been an error on the final resolutions that were passed that misstated the benefit of the sales tax exemption amount for these 2 projects. So all of the other documentation that we had in regards to the project, the cost benefit analysis that was done, that was prepared for the public hearing, everything that was public facing up until the final resolution was correct. Just for whatever reason, that dollar amount.
And this was the amount that was anticipated to approve, that's what you meant to approve at the time?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So, the amount that was in the original resolution, just to kind of remind everybody, listed it as 89,000, but the actual benefit is, just over 503,000 per
But everything that
project.
we had during. the-
Everything that you had leading up to that very last resolution was right, so there was really no misstatement to the public of what the anticipated benefit was, there was
Essentially a
nothing, it
typo in the
was,
final resolution.
yep.
I
So
think
this
I
is a
did the
correction
math,
of that.
I evidently did the math wrong when I did the final resolution. That's the only thing I can think of is, I figure it by taking the benefits that have been requested and applying the sales tax, and I don't know, I forgot to carry the one or whatever happened, but that turned out to be far less than what you guys intended to approve, so.
As long as it is what it was when we did it, and that's what the resolution was, and that's what we committed to, I don't see we can do anything else but correct it. It does make it a little bit, some of the questions asked that are going on as to what we should or shouldn't do with solar programs, and you know where I feel about solar programs, so, but, this is what we approved before, and I don't see how we could do anything different.
Agreed. Other discussion?
Other than to correct it.
Is there a motion to approve solar PV1? We have to do them separately. We have to do them separately, okay. So a motion to approve the revised resolution for Lodi
I
Solar.
almost call it corrected, I guess, instead of revised.
Corrected,
Yeah,
sorry,
corrected,
corrected, sorry,
yeah.
corrected.
Yeah. I'll
Steve,
move.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor, or Kelly, sorry?
Roll call. Mr. Bruce Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Kime,
Yes.
Mr. Brownell,
Yes.
Mr. Brusso,
Yes.
Mr. Lot,
Yes.
Mr. Kircher,
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie,
Yes.
Mr. Tom Murray, and Mr. Shipley absent, motion carried.
Okay, the second one is essentially the same. So do we have a motion on Lodi 2 solar?
I'll make that one.
Ralph, thank you. Second? Anyone?
I'll second.
Ben? Kelly?
Mr. Bruce Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Kime,
Yes.
Mr. Brownell,
Yes.
Mr. Brusso,
Yes.
Mr. Lot,
Yes.
Mr. Kircher,
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie,
Yes.
Mr. Shipley, and Mr. Tom Murray absent, motion carried.
Okay, moving on. The next subject is our office development status. Sarah, do you want to take us through this?
Sure, so what you had in your packets, and Kelly, I'm actually not seeing, oh wait, no, I do see it here, okay. So what you have in your packets, agenda item number 6, the staple thing looks like this. More or less the same as to what we had last time. There's been no changes to the design since we last spoke. The only addition is if you flip that first page over, you'll see a spreadsheet that goes through monthly cash flow analysis, essentially for the IDA, but it's just for what I will, I guess, refer to as the bucket of essentially our discretionary or operating cash, things that aren't tied up in the loan fund or other investments or other obligations. So I know last time we were still a little bit up in the air as to what the recommendation was. Beardsley had done, just as a quick refresher before we get into the actual cash flow analysis. Beardsley had done essentially 4 designs for us. They had some with traditional drywall, and then they did some with glass paneled walls. And then variations of office configurations, open office or not, for the potential tenant. The staff has gotten together and sort of looked at what we like best out of those designs, and would personally like to recommend essentially a 4-office configuration in the IDA space. That gives us room to accommodate our bookkeeper in there with us, and, you know, potential to bring on an intern or something in the future, have space for people to work. With the 2 conference rooms built out in the front, but essentially no investment at this point in a potential tenant space, as we don't have anybody committed to that. And as I'm sure you've all heard by now, but I don't think it was final before our last meeting, the Board of Supervisors did approve the resolution to, enter into a contract with the chamber for $50,000 a year for a tourism center, up on 318. So that more or less rules out the chamber as a potential long-term tenant with us. So with that all being said,
What is
we
the
wanted
county gonna
to,
do relative to us?
not sure.
Relative to support in this coming year?
We have not had those discussions as of yet. There is, this time of year, the New York State Consolidated Funding Application process is open. There is a nonprofit capital facilities improvement grant out there through Empire State Development. The IDA does not constitute a not-for-profit, but our EDC does. And so that is a 50-50 matching grant. The maximum award is up to $100,000. So it would be pretty well within the target of what we're looking at as far as this potential project. So we are actively right now in the process of trying to get a draft application together. And we will likely, if it looks like we will actually be applying for that, we have to sort some things out still as far as their seeker requirements on that grant. We'll have to call an EDC board meeting and have that organization be the one that formally votes to submit an application and all of that. So that could help pretty significantly with a project like this. If we're looking at the scope that the IDA staff is recommending, our total cost initially with everything in was about $250, but the option that we're sort of advocating for would be about $167, so we wouldn't quite be looking at a full $100,000 match, provided those numbers are accurate when it comes to actual bid. So we'll see. There might also need to be an agreement. The EDC does not have the money, so the issue with Empire State Development grants is most state grants, their reimbursement. The EDC does not have quite that much money in the bank, so there might need to be a contract between the two organizations, whereby the IDA essentially contracts the EDC to apply for this grant.
It's not clear to me what design are you recommending?
So if you look at the page, it's further into this stapled packet, you will see, I think it's the last schematic. It's on the double-sided, so it's on the back side of the page. It's SK2 with glass walls. It looks like this one. The only thing that we're essentially carving out of it is this was the one that included an open office layout for the potential tenant, but it still involved putting an actual physical wall where the divider wall goes right now with the conference rooms and repositioning where the entry door is. We're not even recommending doing that much without knowing who the potential tenant would be. Of course, unless the board feels differently. But essentially, this would be the scheme that we would be.
So the scope of the work is to do the 4 offices and the 2 smaller conference rooms, dividing up that space in the front there.
That's what we're proposing.
Oh, I think it's a good plan.
So to go back and to look a little bit at the cash flow, just to, talk about the feasibility of doing a project like this, because I know last time Tom had brought up possibility of financing and, if that's something that we would be looking to do for this type of project. So in the version you guys all have electronically, you have an Excel spreadsheet where you can feel free to, play around with the numbers a little bit as, you see fit. This is the overly expanded version, so it is going to get a little bit trickier to read than if it was all condensed down. But essentially what we're doing is looking from May of this year out until December of next year, estimating what we think our cash receipts and expenses are going to be. So you'll see at the top, we have our cash beginning of period, and this number was taken, from the April financials that we have, 853,322 at the beginning of the period, and then that decreases, based on our cash going in and coming out. So as far as agency fees, we show you a breakdown here. May, we were anticipating 58,000 in income, 4,000 from a Finger Lakes rail pilot, and 54,000 from Seneca County. That's when our annual payment usually comes in. And so you'll see those kind of carried throughout. I will point out June 2024 is the last year for our Del Lago rent payment. So that number does not reappear in June of 2025. The only other projects that we have in here under agency fees is Groggery and then the 2 Lodi solar projects. We purposely did not put the Trelina project in here. It's in the notes at the very bottom of the page with the dollar amount that we would be receiving in an agency fee, but the timing of that project is so uncertain that I think it would be in some ways unwise to bank on that when we're looking at right now potential expense in terms of what can we sustain cash flow wise, but it's there, so it's approximately $1.2 million. The other thing that we did not include under income was potential rent income from a tenant, again because the uncertainty of knowing who a tenant would be and what the timing might be of when someone would come in. But we did provide in the notes an estimate as to what the annual and monthly rent could be from a tenant, so at $15 a square foot, and we broke down what this appropriate square footages would be for each of the shared spaces. Those are all already divided in half, so we'd be splitting those 50-50. The annual rent would be an estimated $23,715, monthly rent being just under $2,000 a month potentially.
Would the idea be to proceed with the work with Beardsley prior to identifying a tenant?
I think so, only because we could spend quite some time trying to identify a tenant. Hopefully it won't take that long, but the other thing is we're gonna need to not be working in that office space next door really when construction is happening, and it gets a lot harder for us to move around the building or to go elsewhere if we're also working around another tenant who's also got space under construction.
The other thing we talked about was the timing of that construction as being kind of winter time
Yep.
instead of sort of outdoor, when the construction trades work outdoors when they can and postpone work that's indoors until the weather has turns unfavorable outside. So we would look at probably November, December, and into early next year for all this work.
And it could have to be a little later than November, December if we were successful in securing the grant that I talked about through the EDC. That might push the timeline back a little bit. I think we'd still be able to do winter, but it might be more properly into the new year winter.
The other discussion around finding another tenant, the sooner we ask, the sooner we get a tenant. And again, my own feeling is I understand the inconvenience of moving back and forth and working around construction. I'm a believer in putting the word out now that a tenant, we will get a bite, I think, my sense is, quicker than we think. Particularly from the county. That'd be my guess. So, I guess, as part of the discussion, we should, I think, or as part of the decision to move forward should also include the timing of when we start advertising. We engage a broker and get that moving. Because the picture that Sarah's painting here of our pro forma forecast is not that pretty, I don't think. One thing it's missing, and one of the things that I've asked Sarah and David to work on is some more realistic estimate of the likely revenue based on our pipeline.
Mm.
So we have roughly 20 to 25 entities that we've visited, we've spoken to them about what their plans are, and then what I've asked Sarah to do is estimate for each of those projects, number one, the likely agency fee, and number two, how likely that is to close in '24 or '25. And a $100,000 agency fee at 10% likelihood is a $10,000 forecasted number. As that improves, the forecasted number increases. As the likelihood of that project closing improves, the size of that forecasted agency fee improves. But, you know, I think we need, it's very hard to make decisions like this one, 200,000+, without a little bit more rigorous revenue forecast.
Mhm.
Because right now, this is ultra conservative, basically what we know of today.
Mhm.
And so, again, if you go over to the county office building, the space that the IDA was in, that we were under the gun to move out of, nothing's happened over there. Which to me indicates, okay, who knows who's in charge? Who knows who's running the show over there? I'd rather run our own show here and do it as well as we know how. And to me, that means getting our revenue picture clarified, and also if there are deals out there, like a tenant, let's get them sooner rather than later. That's my
Now, when I
opinion.
asked you a question earlier about operating, about your $50,000 that the IDA always got before from the county,
Mhm.
you said you weren't really sure about that. The county did provide that before, plus space.
Right.
Oh, I mean,
Provided
we
space that
plan to
operated.
at least request our annual 54.
Okay.
I
So
think
that's
we
the-
would, we haven't decided yet what our request is gonna be for this year, but I think
I think the
we have a
temperature,
case to increase our request. I don't know if that would be
I
granted.
don't know,
or not.
Ernie, what do you think? Do you think the county would be inclined to increase that amount?
I would doubt it.
Okay? So that's
think they-
the current read.
Do you think they'd line it out?
Oh,
No.
I'm sure we would listen to it, okay?
No, but I mean, do you think that they would
Oh, eliminate it?
eliminate the 50,000?
I doubt you'll get more, but I'd be pretty disappointed if, considering that you moved out of all that space that they used to provide to you, that you ended up with no support from them, and you lost that. It would seem like they would at least keep up that space and certainly give you some time to get a tenant, get things working here better than just you're out, plus there's no support.
I think we've gone a long way to try to improve the relationship
Yeah.
with the county, and if in fact turns out that there is no further support, that would surprise me.
I would,
I think you'll get support. I'm not saying if they'll increase the amount.
Okay.
yeah.
They're not gonna take it away.
I would think
Right?
what Ernie's saying is probably gonna be the case. I would be
Yeah.
surprised if it went all the way to the other end of
Yeah,
that.
up or down.
Yeah,
But it's
okay.
obviously not to say that we can't make a bigger request, but the chances of the additional being
Yeah.
approved are slim.
Two more questions. So based on the timing, it looks like we would be ready for a tenant sometime in best case spring, summer next year at this time. Is that right?
Our original timeline would have said January.
Uh-huh.
And the only reason I think maybe from a construction purpose, maybe not January, is purely if we were to be successful in securing that grant.
Mhm.
You know, you have to have contracts and things in place with the state. So then I would say that pushes maybe out till March, as a best guess.
And do we have an ideal tenant profile that we're targeting, or is it just find a broker and whoever is willing to pay the rent?
I don't know, I guess that's a question for discussion. I mean, the thing with a broker is obviously that helps us someone, you know, professional in the area to help with the marketing. The problem with a broker with rent is they're gonna take, you know, a cut of it, and we're not talking about,
Very big.
as it is, you know, the rent's not really, it's gonna take us potentially 5 years to make back, you know, if we do even the basic tenant build out over there with everything, and we're talking about maybe a $200,000 or $250,000 cost. You know, we're talking about 5 years of full rent to sort of
Payback.
Just get.
pay back what we spent on construction of the whole building. So I don't know, I think as far as, you know, what we've talked about internally are ideal. I mean, obviously the chamber was up there on the list, but sort of, you know, professional organization that's probably doesn't have a need for high visibility necessarily. I mean, that's the one thing that I think was a little bit, would have been tricky for the chamber, is we're not gonna be able to really have much visibility here. And we'll get to this sort of in the next agenda item, but we don't have any agreement with the hotel that's gonna allow us right now to put signs or anything on Route 414. We have a right of way through the parking lot, and that's more or less it. So, not to say we couldn't try to negotiate something like that, but that's gotta be a whole new agreement that we pursue with them, if that's the case. So, you know, ideally, I would like it to be somebody that is serving the business community kind of in a similar or complementary way to how we are. I think it would be nice to be able to have this be more of a economic development center or business service center, or, you know, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it's sort of whoever is interested and is not gonna, you know, be disruptive to our everyday business.
Putting two things together, I remember a couple of meetings ago, you acknowledging the utility of being co-located with the county in terms of relationships and so on and so forth, and just listening to Ernie's thoughts about how the county will react in terms of, you know, funding back to the IDA. Depending on our relationship, depending on the demand, is there a conversation to be had with the county manager that says something like, we want to work together with you to help find a tenant, and ideally it's someone from the county, given the demand that you have for space, et cetera. Maybe that's not there, but that would be a way of giving back to the IDA. Just a thought.
Very well could be. I think to Bruce's point, the LDC would probably be the strongest candidate. Really, aside from that, you know, the folks at the county that we work most often with, county planning, they just got moved, you know, recently to new space. And I don't necessarily see them moving the planning department out of that building into somewhere with us.
Yep.
And then aside from that, it's really the supervisors and the county manager, and, you know, I mean, none of them are gonna
Move out.
come over here or whatever to do
Okay.
meetings and things, but I think the LDC could be a candidate. I don't know if they would want that entire space, or if, you know, they would want a much smaller space potentially for just 2 people, or what the LDC's ability to pay would be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's gonna hinge entirely on, essentially on the county funding them. LDCs are not set up in a way to really be able to make their own money. It's very difficult to have a profitable or self-sustaining LDC in that way. So we'll see. I mean, the county's ARPA funds, you know, they did set aside $250 for the first year, but I don't know, has there been other discussion as far as budget? Yeah.
So I guess, you know, just trying to put all this together, because we've talked about an awful lot of things. Kind of going back to square one, from the IDA perspective, the IDA office perspective, it looks like the plan would be to go ahead and do the 4 office glass walls and close the conference room. And at least at this point, not touch the tenant area. That we would be looking at trying to get a grant to help with that capital expense, which could influence the timing. regardless of the grant or not, the timing of construction would be more winter time. And so we would probably not be you would not be in the new offices up and operating until probably this time next year, round number. So that's sort of the IDA portion. The tenant portion is depending on who the tenant is or what they need or whatever, could potentially, almost like what you guys did, move in next week, set up a couple desks, and so,
Yeah.
if the LDC or some other entity needed to move in, they don't necessarily need to move in, wait a year to move in. They could move in if they don't mind card table and folding chairs and, I'm a little exaggerating here, but they could do that. And then they would need to work around the same construction that the IDA would need to work around. And if we did get a tenant sooner, then that can be included in. If we're not doing the work until, say, early winter, that provides some time. If we did have a tenant identified, that they need a certain configuration to add that in.
So, great recap. So our plan would be to seek a tenant immediately? Is that what I'm hearing? I didn't understand the time frame for
Well,
when.
I think the sort of let's say the easy, the low-hanging fruit, if the LDC, I guess, if it's real, it's going to be created and it's going to be sometime soon, and they need a space, and this is available, it probably is a pretty decent fit for everybody. I mean, there's an awful lot of ifs there.
Mhm.
So if that happens, sure, that's a great. And then if, again, the county provides funding for the LDC to find a spot.
I think that's the thing. I think it comes down to if you can find a tenant that's gonna be a good fit,
Yeah,
also has funding that's gonna cover some of the costs that, you're not covering the
yeah,
cost of somebody, so you're bringing somebody in, you make it work right away for them, they're not gonna have any money, I wouldn't do that. If somebody could come in here and they had some funding sources, the county especially, if they were gonna fund it and it was somehow associated with the county, then great, I'd fall over backwards to try to fit somebody in.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that for somebody that didn't even have figured out where their funding was coming from, and
Mhm.
yeah.
the part of the heat bills and things like that's just gonna be more for us.
And hopefully, I don't know, I mean, things move slow at times, sometimes painfully slow. But, if the LDC is going to happen and they're looking, it seems that at least by fall, that decision will be in place.
And they've got to recruit an executive director. A qualified, professional, serious executive director needs to be sold. And where are they gonna sit? Are they gonna be in the basement of the off-county building, or is this fresh territory for them to set up next door to the IDA? I mean, there's some practicalities that would push the county to make this decision sooner, and we can push on
We
that.
can work
Yeah,
on
because
that.
I would hate to go out to try to find a tenant now in the middle of all this other,
We could-
construction, unless it's like the LDC, now that's an easy fit in. And if fall happens and it's just not gonna work, then,
We can
No.
I can get a feel for that
Yeah.
quite quickly, I think. I can get a feel for it.
The other thing is, we've been putting out feelers sort of as much as we can, without doing any official real advertising. We mentioned on One Seneca that we have this space and that we're gonna be looking for potential tenants. And if people are, interested in space, sort of come have a conversation with us. We also had a meeting with SBDC. They would not be sort of a paying tenant. They're looking to do their fast track for business. It's like a 3-day training thing. They're looking to do that out of one of our conference rooms in, August. and potentially have one of their business advisors, you know, come out once a week and spend a few hours meeting with companies and that kind of thing. That's more of a partnership than anything, and us just sort of using our space as more or less an in-kind donation to them.
I'm not sure we're in much position to do in-kind donations.
Well, they're not in a position to pay.
But that doesn't
That's
mean
tough.
that we need to pick that up.
No, but I'm not saying like a big space. I'm not saying we would do any construction or
Yeah.
anything for them. It's more, you know, we have some space that they can come and work out of for a few hours. But as far as a tenant, when we had the conversation with them, one of the things that we mentioned was the types of people we'd be looking for, and they were gonna help us sort of brainstorm. I don't know if anybody is familiar with one group, but there was, you know, that was sort of their idea they threw out there as somebody that is, you know, not so much on the economic development side, but a company that provides, you know, services to the business community that aren't always available locally. I don't think they really have a footprint in the Finger Lakes or in this area, and maybe somebody like that would be interested in sort of a new small satellite office.
Ernie?
This doesn't look good, as you said. What's the big rush even for the idea to redo this building and spend this kind of money? We might better get a broker, get somebody in here to get us somebody that will rent it and hire quality people. And then go ahead and plan it, because whatever we do, if somebody comes in, a big company wants to release part of this, you may have to change everything again. It seems ridiculous to me. You can't, you're working here now, isn't it working? Do we need to spend all this kind of money until we get a good renter and then have it drawn and see what they need? It's only some time, and getting the broker in here might do us a lot of good. I don't mean a local broker, we gotta get a broker higher up in some of these real estate people.
Brokers take.
The ones that are looking and knowing where the renters are.
20-30% for
Yeah.
a couple of years. The
Good.
brokers are really expensive that I've ever talked
You're
to.
spending a lot of money here, then they have to be changed.
Because like right now, we're not spending any money on the tenant half of the facility.
Right, but you
Because,
are here, so supposing it upsets what you've already done when you get a big tenant.
well, I guess what you're saying is then what the tenant needs would supersede the IDA, and let's design around a tenant, and then whatever is left over,
What I'm saying, I think it's,
you know.
I think you're spending money before you should, and too much money when this building was wanted and come in and it's workable.
To me,
That's a
I'd go
fair
out,
point.
I'd be working on your grant. If you get a grant that's gonna cover a pretty good chunk of this money, I'd go ahead and finish your space up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the challenge Ernie, is if the tenant space we have isn't big enough to really attract some major entity coming here. I don't know how much a big broker is even gonna work at it, cause
And a
You don't
broker's
have
gonna
enough
cost some
space.
money also.
Yeah.
if you had as much space again as you have here, yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. To me, what I'd be trying to do is get your grant work. I think you can, easy for me to say, I'm not down here, you know, but I think you can probably live with what's here for a while. But I'd be trying to pursue the grant. If you can get grant money in to fix your space up, that's gonna cover a pretty good part of it. If during that time frame you find another tenant that wants to come in at that time and do it all at the same time, great. If you don't, get the grant money in and you'll pay for most of what you're doing. I'd fix your space up and go from there.
That was exactly my point on the ideal tenant profile, because I think being able to articulate that will tell you what you're gonna get in the market. We're
Yeah.
not casting a wide net. There's a focus on who
Yeah.
you know, what type of organization would actually be interested.
In that same conversation, your $2,000 a month, I see, is based on costs, and it came to about $15 a square foot, did you say?
So the estimated rent is not based on cost. The $15 a square foot was a number that was that essentially came from the appraisal that we had done. So when the appraisal was done, they estimated rent initially at $10 a square foot locally, but that was in a case where a tenant is paying for their utilities and everything. We're occupying the space. We're obviously already paying the utilities and the cleaning costs and all the other things. So in that case, the appraiser had said, really when you have that stuff included in the rent, your rent is gonna be more like $15 a square
Okay, so
foot.
that
So
is-
that's where the number came
It's a
from.
market rate.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
So essentially, I guess the hope here is the tenant rent covers the monthly expenses. And that's about it, so
That'd be great.
that's, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not gonna make money, but if it can cover the expenses and make it a break even.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we still need to pay for any capital changes, capital costs, but if we can break even on expenses.
We'll see. When we were first doing estimates back before we moved in here, our estimates were coming in more around total $50,000 a year. But then when I went to sit down and actually go through the numbers for these updated spreadsheets, obviously it was considerably less. We'll see. I mean, we've had some utility bills, but I guess we'll have to actually see once we're here over a year what our utility bills over that period of time are. For Excelis, there was some that were quite high, especially because there's a sprinkler system here outside, lawn irrigation, which is not necessary. So some of those things, and that was running all last summer, so we'll see. There may be, it's possible the estimate that I've provided is maybe on the too low end now. I'm not sure. We might be splitting the difference somewhere there, but
So if what Peter's saying is true, would we see a payback from the tenant, or would we just be covering our costs?
we'd be pretty much lucky to cover our costs.
Okay, so there would
We're not
be
going to be doing this. It's not
Yeah.
going to make us any money to put away.
Mhm.
And this building overall is going to cost us more because
Yeah.
eventually we'll have capital expenses and things that we'll have to, account for. Sorry to be a downer.
You don't have that much space, it's hard to get really
It's not
attractive
that
tenants in when you got a
big.
small space. To me, if you cover your expenses, you're probably gonna be lucky. To me, it's probably hard to do that ideally. I was hopeful that the chamber would come here and there was a correlation between us and them better. If you got somebody else that came in here that had a high correlation between economic development in the county and things like that, and us, and there was an affiliation benefit there, that would be good. If you had some outside consultant that wanted to provide services and recommendations to businesses and whatnot, and do consulting work that helped businesses out. If you could hook up with somebody that brought a benefit in, soil, water conservation, somebody in the ag side of it with the vineyard industry, or some consultant in that arena. If you could get somebody that was a fit, that might be more valuable to you than what you're going to get out of the rent. But if we don't have that, we ought to at least cover our costs.
Yeah.
This reminds me of a conversation we had 6 or 8 months ago about the IDA doesn't want to be a landlord. We're a developer, not landlords.
Well, that ship has sailed.
That got forced on us. That is true.
Yeah.
But ideally, we would be a landlord to someone that is, there's a mutually beneficial relationship for them being here aside from just the office space. But that's, best case scenario. We'll see.
So here's a proposal, I think Steve and Seth kind of laid out a timetable and a plan that makes sense. It means going out and identifying potential candidates now and really vetting them in a serious way and saying, okay, we can rule out A, B, C, D, and E, but we've got now 2 possibilities that we now have to really qualify and lock in.
And at the same time, working on grants, and if you.
Same time working on grants. I think you should talk to the bank about financing, the balance. I think that's not a bad idea. Tom sort of disclosed his own conflict there, but it makes sense. As long as our forecast is as thin as it is right now, I
Yeah.
think that's a reasonable approach, I think.
Yeah, so.
Well, if there's no, if you can take the balance of what the grant doesn't cover and consider financing a chunk of it. It's not gonna be,
We'll have to, if we are successful with the grant, there is a 10% equity requirement. So the IDA/EDC, for now, we'll talk about them as a combined entity, would have to contribute 10% of the project cost
Yeah.
just as their own equity, up to 100,000, but again, it depends on what we're talking as the scope of the construction, but up to $100,000 max, or 50% is reimbursable, so we'd have to have those funds on hand, but they'd get paid back, and then we could look at the other portion being,
could that grant position the IDA as an economic development sort of rebrand and restart in this community? I mean, it has to be, I think, presented in a way that is in fact what it really is.
yes, so the grant has to be the EDC, but we can play up, so they, it's, the purpose is capital improvements for nonprofit organizations that provide economic and community benefit. And, this being a shared office space, essentially, because it is, between the IDA and the EDC, we can talk about both organizations, the benefit they bring to the community, that kind of thing. And obviously, if we had a tenant in mind and knew who it was, we could play that up too. For now, we can talk about, the benefit of bringing in prospective tenants and the types of people that we're trying to attract, and, that sort of thing. So, yes, we can do that. The thing with the grant is, we'll be working on the application, getting things together, and we'll keep everybody updated on that. I think in order for us to have timings right, the reason that we were considering this month some kind of sort of approval to move ahead with a design was so that Beardsley could start doing construction documents, which we need in order to get to a bid phase. And obviously we'll have to have work, bid it out and a contractor selected in order to have a potentially winter construction start time. So even though we sort of have time, we have to start moving potentially on the other pieces. We could always choose if,
And what's Beardsley's cost to do the other?
that's in here.
It's in
So
there,
it
it's
was
starting
23,000 and then another 1,500, and then there was sort of the final construction management phase, which they said would be an hourly. So there really wasn't necessarily as much of an estimate on that, but
What's the hourly rate?
I think it depends probably on who it is from
Yeah.
the staff that's doing it.
$70.
And that's like the very last phase, so I'm sure we'd get more clarity as we got closer to that. But for the construction documents and the bid management itself, it was that, essentially
Yeah,
24,500.
that's your right thing. You're not gonna have a huge management to this project. It's not that big a project. It's not like you're doing site work and running water and everything else. You just,
So in order to sort of get things to the next step, what we're looking at in expense is really, 24,500 really additional to get that. To get construction documents, to get something bid, so that, if we do get the grant, we'd be ready to go, get construction done. If we don't, I suppose the board could always reconsider at that point.
So Sarah, what do you need to apply for the grant? I think you said someplace it was a July 24th.
July 31st, end of July. So we're kind of going through the process right now. Dave has started drafting answers to the questions. We will need letters of support, so that's something I've got to get working on this week, is a draft letter of support that we can circulate. We'll be asking the county, the chamber, other organizations for those. The big thing, or I guess the two big things that we need to get sorted out, is there's language in there about seeker needing to be, potentially done for the project. So I've got to talk to Rob more about that and what that potentially looks like, since we're not ready to apply for building permits and things yet. I'm not really sure how we go about doing seeker, and I don't know if we can be lead agency on our own sort of project. I
I was
would
gonna
think
say,
not.
seeker's not gonna be that much trouble, you
I
do
don't
them
think-
yourself,
I
you
mean,
say
it's an
you're okay.
interior renovation. I wouldn't think it's a big deal, but I don't know, we need to just make sure we have those types of things
Yeah.
buttoned up. And then the other bit is really whatever contract might need to be in place in order to put the funds into the EDC for the project.
So at this point, do we need a motion from this board to get this ball rolling to spend the money?
Yes, we would need some kind of motion.
You're asking the, are you asking the board to approve $24,500
Right.
to engage Beardsley in the next stage of this, so we have construction drawings that can go out to bid?
Yes,
Okay.
and then the other piece of that is, you know, that the recommendation, the thing we want construction drawings for is that layout we talked about. So 4 offices, 2 conference rooms, with at this time, no construction drawings on a tenant space.
Mindful of Bernie's point, and I think it's a good one. I think 2 meetings ago, Bruce, you mentioned construction drawings in hand. We can, that's transferable to anybody that we want to work with, so there's value there, right?
Yeah, I think there's value there. I mean, everyone has a different view. I think the consensus here is that plan is strikes the balance between cost and sort of livability in an office setting. So I would support going forward with that sort of first round, first pass at construction drawings.
Yeah, I just think you ought to be pushing on all of it.
On all of them.
You know, looking for can we get funding here to help with that? Can we be working on tenants? You know,
Yep.
that we,
Everything in
that we
parallel.
spend the $24,000 on getting drawings ready, we'll probably do fairly well doing construction during the winter time. Everybody wants the construction during the winter.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with that, I just want us to push the other things.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think we get, unless we present a contractor with construction drawings, I don't think we're serious. So let's do the
No.
drawings, get a real bona fide bid, they'll give us their best shot, and if we proceed in the fall, we'll have the best price we can think of.
And if for some reason, you know, we get a tenant with serious interest between now and the next
Then we
couple
can-
months,
then we can
that's not to
address
say that we
that.
can't have the construction drawings done up for that portion and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, there's
have it
no
sort of
effect.
all,
They're 2 separate.
yeah.
So we're gonna be looking for tenants
Right away.
right away.
No broker,
Okay.
no broker.
No broker.
You start with, yeah.
Back to the question that was just asked, though, any blockers, anything else that you feel like you need to move forward in the grant writing process?
Not as of right now. We just learned about the program last week and started the application that same day, so we're still kind of going through everything, but we'll keep everybody posted if there are things that we sort of need, and, you know, we'll see timing wise if we have to, you know, call any special board meetings or anything like that to get approvals and things in place beforehand.
So,
So if we don't get a possible tenants between now and next meeting,
we won't, I doubt we will, Ernie, I doubt. I mean, we're gonna lean on the most likely suspects soonest. That's the county and that's the chamber, because the chamber's gotta go somewhere. They may not be long-term, they'll probably be short-term, but they're gonna need to go somewhere. So between the 2 of them, I think,
I don't know if they have to get out now or.
no, I think the conditions there, the current landlord, they're on a month-to-month, the current landlord's doing construction. At least they present the fact that it's clearly not a long-term
No, right, I
situation.
know, but I don't think there's any push for them to get
No,
out.
no, there's no push.
And MRV is in there also. So,
Yeah, but just sort of in a
Yeah.
small way.
yeah.
But those are the first 2, and I'll be able to get feedback from them within a week. Whether it's definitive or not, but I certainly can get feedback from them. So do we need a motion to give the staff the approval to proceed for the next stage with Beardsley to produce construction drawings?
So you're
Yes.
somewhere around 25,000.
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Kime, Mr. Kircher, second. we understand the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next two items on the agenda are really mine, and again, I don't think we need to go too far into these, but the first one, number 6, the discussion of IDA office branding really is a question of IDA branding and how the IDA is positioning itself to the public. And I think the IDA, as explicitly the Industrial Development Agency, has, you know, sort of some brand negatives on it. And the question for us is, would we consider renaming this entity, as other counties have, to something other than IDA, for two reasons. One, it really sort of closes the door on the old and opens the door on the new. And number two, irrespective of how the Seneca County IDA is branded, an industrial development agency really isn't kind of accurate when it comes to what we're trying to do here. So the question really on the table is, does anyone feel strongly one way or another about considering an alternative brand for what this entity does? It would be the Seneca County IDA doing business as, you know, Seneca First, or you name it, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, you know, good point is, you know, you look at Seneca County Industrial Development, how much industry, and, you know, what is that? I'm, you know, certainly not opposed, it makes sense. My biggest concern is how that fits in with the other community and county entities. You know, we have, you know, and unfortunately, we have like one Seneca, so that's sort of, you know, but we're separate from that. And then if the county is doing this LDC and let's take control of economic development, you know, is it confusing for us to be the county economic development when the county board of supervisors says, no, we're in charge of economic development?
Yeah.
It's, you know, I hate to have it be messy. I agree that we should be able to update what we are so it's clear to people, you know, what we do and what we are. I think the difficulty is kind of meshing that in so we don't confuse anything, or I don't know. There's just so many entities and it's just so confusing. And that's what the strategic plan is supposed to solve.
And it's the outside entities that are coming in that need to be able to look you up and find you and find out where is your IDA. So if you have entities that are from out of the area looking at different counties and looking where to go, I wouldn't get so creative with it that I'm trying to find the Seneca County IDA. I can't even find it. So
Fair point.
I don't have any problem with changing it and
Right.
coming up with a different name, but if somebody's in that industry or in that business and they're looking for pilot programs and things like that, they're gonna look under IDA.
Yeah, good point.
So just don't get so creative with it that people can't figure out who we are. I think the county's gonna have a little bit of a struggle with different entities all getting into the same bailiwick without some, the biggest thing you always want if you're gonna do economic development is you need, who do we go to?
Right.
And when you get, you know, do I go to a chamber? Do I go to the county on their thing? Do I come here? Where do I go? And most people's complaint is if I got 2, 3, 4 places and you got a couple of them almost redirecting people to different places or fighting over who, they go, I need to go someplace else. This county doesn't even have a idea who's running what.
Fair-
So we
fair
gotta
point.
be cognizant of that when if you do it.
Good point.
Other comments? I mean, nothing's happening, we're just kind of sort of floating the idea for feedback here. Because we need, I mean, part of it was prompted by the need for a sign, we don't even have the right to put a sign out yet, so it's.
I mean, we could put one potentially, you know, at the end of our driveway.
Yeah.
How tall?
Steve and I talked about that.
Like
One of these driveways would be a good idea, I think, or else,
I do.
I don't know what the height regulations are around here, you put one like 50 feet tall with a flashing light on top of it.
So-
But how many people actually drive by and wanna drive in and go see the IDA people? They're either gonna have already
Not
contact with
often.